Think of the people you interact with every day. Would you want to spend a day in a canoe with them? This show is about hearing stories from exceptional people that can help jumpstart and inspire you to create the life you want. One filled with wealth, wisdom, meaning, and purpose. And that starts with surrounding yourself with the right people. And the people I'm interviewing, I believe you'd want to spend a day with in a canoe. I'm your host, Nathan Mercereau. I'm delighted today to be joined by Doug Speight out of Durham, North Carolina. Doug is a serial entrepreneur, and he and I recently met at a conference by sitting down for breakfast, and out of a group of 800 people had significant and meaningful conversations. So, Doug, great to see you again, and thanks for joining Day in the Canoe podcast. If you wouldn't mind sharing with listeners what your background, and then we'll get to what you're working on now.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you for the invitation, Nathan. I really do appreciate it. Had a great time with you at the Strategic Growth Forum, and look forward to having a great conversation here. So my background actually starts back in the 1930s. My grandfather, Theodore Roosevelt Speight, started his first company in 1938. And he really set the tone for the remainder of our family. I'm third generation entrepreneur. In fact, the company that my grandfather started in 1938 is still operating 84 years, going on 84 years later. My father followed suit, and I followed suit as well. I have a background in engineering. I originally went to college to get away from entrepreneurship and design Formula One race cars, believe it or not. And that turned into my very first startup in engineering design. And so I am on startups numbers 6, 7, and 8. All 6 of them have been in very different areas, from engineering design to advanced materials and carbon fiber to fintech to enterprise software. And so, as my wife likes to say, I have professional ADD. So I love to learn new things and learn new industries for the first time. And as a result of it, all of my startups have been in a very different space. But it's been a wonderful ride.
And during COVID, you had shared with me earlier that you had a realization and a pivot, which is leading to another chapter of your startup. What's that about?
Absolutely. So I was in the last 2 startups I had were in enterprise software, primarily aimed at large corporate partners, efficiency enhancements, things of that nature, workflow and process management. And during COVID, particularly during our quarantine, I started to have this existential crisis around what my legacy would be, and thinking through all of the products that I had been a part of creating. Sure, they may have saved time and energy for a handful of people around the globe. But did they really materially change anyone's lives? Did they really increase the quality of life for anyone around the globe? And so I really started becoming somewhat disenchanted around technology and software, and started to focus in on clean tech. And I just immersed myself in clean tech over the course of COVID, most of 2020. And came in contact with investors in the clean tech space who wanted to develop a new strategy around clean tech innovations and developing new technologies to enhance water quality. And so I was invited to come in as CEO of that company, and I'm running that company and 2 of its portfolio companies today.
And what's the focus of the clean tech in terms of your initiatives and the target of what you're trying to support and solve?
Well, we develop both specialty chemicals and equipment that reverse environmental contamination and restore clean water. So our first product is primarily built around groundwater remediation. So taking large sites that have underwater tank leakage mostly petroleum products and the like, and treating those contaminants in the soil before they become part of our drinking water supply. And so we've developed a new suite of products around those specialty chemicals. We also have a division that works on equipment that treats very nasty industrial chemicals before they're released into the water supply.
That's a really critical and much needed area. So that definitely aligns with your objective of making an impact and leaving a legacy. I want to go back to your family history. It's pretty rare to have multi-generation family businesses evolve. And how would you what would you attribute to the longevity of your family and your family story?
That's a great question. I would say that the first thing that comes to mind is a laser focus on the customer. My grandfather taught me that at an early age, is that everything revolves around the customer base. And so our first company, Speight's Auto Service, that started in 1938, was geared around automotive service and maintenance for the community in Durham, North Carolina. And grew to include fleet maintenance for the city of Durham, the state of North Carolina, and the rest. And over time, that industry, as you well know, has changed significantly. There's a lot of fragmentation in the space, not a great deal of differentiation among generalist firms like ours. And so as we take that into the future, I'm actually reformatting and repositioning the company as the first national chain of service centers for hybrid and EV vehicles. We see, of course, the tea leaves about the future and what it holds for electrification of vehicle fleets. And we see an opportunity to really carve out a specialty firm built upon some of the theses of the past years, but building on new industry trends for the future.
Now, when we met for breakfast at the conference we attended, it was just amazing the connections that we started sharing. As you think about moments in your life, whether it's on your career path or just some time periods where there's been challenges or opportunities, what stands out as you look back as maybe some defining moments or learning moments that you've experienced that you still carry with you today?
Oh, great question. One of the first moments that stands out for me is actually during business school. So I got my MBA from Keenan Flagler Business School at UNC Chapel Hill. One of the professors there, Hugh O'Neill, our strategy professor, was giving a presentation one day. And he said in a very sort of colloquial Southern way, part of strategy is going where they ain't. And he meant that to sound as homey as it sounds today. But it was a brilliant statement, and it stuck with me for my entire career. Go where the competition, aren't. And I remembered that my entire career. So I've always been drawn to sort of these blue sky areas and the unaddressed market opportunities, these voids in the marketplace where we can create a brand new slate of options, tabula rasa, if you will, and build upon a very new model, maybe applying lessons from other industries, but building new solutions. And so I've done that my entire career. I've been drawn to that my entire career. And that's one thing that stood out to me. Another item that stood out to me was my grandfather. So coming up to my grandfather's 90, he must have been turning 95 at that point. One of the things I had noticed throughout his career was that many men, whether they were colleagues, in some cases competitors, always came to visit him at his office. Ever since I was a little boy, they came to visit him in his office just to seek his guidance on things. Everyone respected his wisdom. And I asked him about that in advance of his 95th birthday. And I remember the thing that he told me. He said, Doug, the only thing that I know for sure today is how much I did not know the day before. And that sense of humility really stuck with me and really affected me. And particularly in the startup space, it is a very humbling experience. The roller coaster ride with startups, the ups and downs and turns, and going into every single day with the humility to say, I know I don't know everything. In fact, I know how much I do not know. That there's a great deal that I don't know has helped me tremendously to go into situations and learn new industries and connect with new expertise and scientists and engineers across the country.
I'd like to zone in on that whole startup stage because it's a pretty risky, lonely space. I remember when I started my first company, Oakland Wealth Management, I had a detailed business plan. I talked to all the appropriate parties, had my wife buy in, and went for it. And 9 months later was broke. And and I'm like, hey, that's not on the spreadsheet. That's not in the business plan. And it was tough, but it was a great lesson. And I think when you go into that startup space, it's like entering almost a dark room, and it's by yourself, and you've got to really, kind of find your way. What lessons have you learned over the years that you're applying now as best practices on the startup basis?
That's a great point. The startup journey is just so rife with wins, losses, and everything in between. One of the things that I have learned, and I don't know if this can be extrapolated across all entrepreneurs' experiences, but it's certainly been true for me, is that money is not the key metric for me. If that were the case, I would have failed a long time ago. I've won it all, I've lost it all on various occasions. And so I really had to come to terms with the learning being the primary motivator for me in startups, learning new industries and switching, in some cases, entire industries and going to others and learning them again from the ground up, humbling myself and learning from my colleagues and industry researchers and the like. And so I would say that the boom and bust cycles for me have been weathered by who I've met, number one, what I've learned, number two, and number three, the impact that I've been able to create. And every time I look back on that, I unequivocally realize that I've won. And so looking at how I measure myself in a different way outside of just the financial rewards has really helped me to moderate my expectations on this journey.
That's great perspective. And I'm recalling my days on that startup phase where, for me, starting the 10th month, the 11th month, the 12th month is when I started to see things turn around, and the company took off, and it was all good. But it's the fortitude, it's the discipline, it's the grit that it takes to go through those dark times, and also look for learning, and that takes a state of humility for sure. So I think your grandfather was spot on. So as you're thinking about where you're at now and what's ahead, what's energizing you? What's inspiring you? What are you dreaming about? What's on the Doug dashboard of A?
Right. That's a great question. One of the things that really makes me extremely excited and confident in our future is this new appetite for environmental, social, and governance across the corporate enterprise. So I don't recall any time, and certainly not in my lifetime, where the focus on impacts of the environment and also corporate responsibility for society has been so high and has vaulted to the top of the priority list for most CEOs. I think that's a welcome change, particularly given the the shareholder orientation that most corporations have had for the last few decades, and now they're turning their thoughts to more stakeholder orientation, realizing that their company does not exist in a void, but exists in an ecosystem, and it's all of our responsibility to take care of that ecosystem, whether that's social, whether that's environmental, and so that excites me a great deal. I have also always been a dreamer myself. So I was a big space enthusiast as a kid, loved NASA, wanted to be an astronaut early on. And so I am given to large, audacious visions. I call myself a serial starter, not necessarily a serial entrepreneur. I'm good at the formative stages, but once companies become more mature and processes and structure and expansion starts to become the focus, many times I lose interest because I'm a builder. And so one of the things that's exciting me about the future is being able to blend those two spaces, from which allows me to build new companies in these sort of blue sky or blue ocean spaces, but then coupling that with expertise and experience that allows those companies to grow and expand and flourish. And so really bridging those two has been a bit of self-exploration for me, and understanding my limitations and where my both interest and abilities tap out, and getting more people involved in advance of that. And it's been a wonderful experience. I've really learned a great deal from my colleagues in the space, the advisors and boards of directors that I put around my companies, and even from my employees who've really been a wonderful team in building these companies.
And do you find that the employee or team base is more engaged when there's a clear sense of purpose and mission? Like, what has been your read in that front culture?
Without question, the team is so much more engaged with an audacious and challenging stretch goal, but also with clarity in what the end goal looks like, and the finish line. And so that was actually the case with my current companies, the Triad Growth Partners, Technology Development Group, and Axe Nano in our corporate portfolio. They had an interim CEO for close to 2 years. Wonderful job in keeping the company stable and solvent, but I think lacking a grand vision to chase after. And so when I came in, of course, that was the very first thing that I addressed is, what is the vision for this company? Where are we headed? And what's going to be the global impact? How will the world know that we were here after we're long gone, centuries after the company evolves into something else? And so providing that vision was, I think, a key pivotal moment for our company that allowed us to all sort of rally around that vision and organize ourselves differently.
It's fantastic. Doug, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. And I love your energy, and I'm confident that the future is bright. And thanks for being on Day in the Canoe.
Absolutely. Likewise, my friend. Always great to connect with you. Look forward to catching up in person sometime soon.
Sounds fantastic. Take care.
You too, Nathan.
Thank you for listening and tuning in to Day in a Canoe. We are thrilled to have you as part of our community. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share it with your friends and loved ones. You can always get more information at dayinacanoe.com. We'll see you next time.